The folks in Silver Gulch caught sight of the judge's young bride dashing barefoot at first light, and the entire settlement came to a standstill. Emily Hargrove never dashed. She glided like someone forever awaiting approval. But that dawn, her chemise was ripped, her locks untamed, and terror stuck to her features like grit on a dusty pony. She hurried across Main Avenue swiftly, tripped just once, then bolted toward the lofty autumn meadows that rolled out toward the Hale homestead. A lady only dashes like that when she's fleeing from something she can't battle. Emily Hargrove, 22, lovely and reserved, always draped in long garments even when the warmth danced off the shingles. Wed to Judge Harlan Hargrove, a 55-year-old fellow who spoke of fairness like he possessed it. But the gentleman she dashed to wasn't one the locals relied on. Marcus Hale, 48, a homesteader who dwelled solitary on a swath of parched Wyoming grassland. Towering, rugged, and mute as creekstone, he rode into Silver Gulch a handful of times monthly for provisions and departed before folks could spark a chat. Rumors flew that odd wails echoed from his property well past twilight. Months prior, Emily had encountered Marcus along the path when her mare went hobbled close to his spread. He offered few words, simply crouched in the soil, mended the hoof with calm forbearance, and retreated like a soul anticipating no repayment. His palms had been tender, and his gaze had been warm. She never let that slip her mind. So when the judge's bride vanished in the direction of his homestead, the whole settlement murmured the identical thought all at once. Something sinister was poised to unfold. The judge burst forth by midday, flushed and raging, bellowing that Marcus Hale had snatched her without consent, seized her because he was precisely the sort of rogue apt for something dreadful. And the settlement swallowed his tale without a second thought. Horsemen cinched up quick, gents assembled shotguns, grumbled blessings, and trailed the spoor heading to Hale Homestead. But amid all the fury and clamor, there lingered a nugget none of them could dismiss. Every soul who glimpsed Emily Hargrove at dawn observed her dash toward Marcus Hale, not fleeing from. She didn't cry out his name, she didn't tumble or grovel or plead for aid. She selected that path. She selected that spread. And as the horsemen faded into the autumn blaze, the souls left behind lingered in quiet, mulling that detail in their heads like a pebble they couldn't overlook. Because if she was genuinely fleeing for her existence, why would she bolt right into the embrace of a man the whole settlement dreaded? By mid-morning, Silver Gulch buzzed like a wasp's burrow someone had stirred up. News flew that Emily Hargrove remained vanished, and Judge Hargrove lost no moment jabbing his digit at the sole gent the settlement already dreaded. He perched on the county house steps, hollering that Marcus Hale had pilfered his bride. Gents clustered swift because dread spread swifter than facts. Nobody probed why Emily had bolted toward his homestead. They merely embraced Judge Hargrove's wrath of Scripture. Prints were spotted by the stream, hoof prints stamped firm in the muck, a shredded scrap of Emily's azure gown hooked on a twig. To the horsemen, that sufficed as evidence. They pressed on to Hale Homestead with firearms primed and tempers taut. When they arrived at the homestead, the courtyard was still, eerily still. The gents advanced cautious, haunted by their own fancies. Dread amplifies every sound. They booted the stable entrance ajar, and daylight flooded the sight within. Emily reclined on a weathered pallet, her flesh glossy with perspiration, and a crimson wrap clamped at her flank. The slash was profound, the sort born from tumbling fiercely against a steel barrier when she attempted to flee the judge the prior evening. Her arm bore new cord chafes, scarlet and sore against her fair hide. A timber bench by the entry had toppled sideways, implements and cloth strewn over the clay ground like the remnants of a tussle. She had bolted the instant the heavens lightened, aware dawn was the sole instant he slumbered profoundly. She knew she couldn't seek the settlement healer. If she did, they'd haul her right back to the judge. So she bolted toward the only gent who had ever displayed her mercy without craving a quid pro quo. Marcus Hale positioned himself between her and the entry, a blade in his grip and a rag of shredded fabric in the other, a modest blaze flickering in the nook.
His tunic was rent at the collar, a new gouge evident on his bicep. To the gents framed in that threshold, the tableau spun a yarn they had already resolved to accept. The horsemen didn't pause for queries. They lunged at him, hauled him into the grime, and bound his wrists at his back. Before they prodded him to a mount, Marcus uttered one phrase, soft and firm. "I didn't seize her. She came here by choice." No one heeded. Dread drowned his tone that day. To them, the tableau was plain. The judge's bride was injured. The homesteader loomed above her with a dagger. The reality didn't count. What counted was that they reckoned they had snared a beast. Emily was borne back to settlement, half aware and quivering. Marcus was hurled into a cage behind the county house. Folks thronged the tiny grated pane just to steal a peek at him. They hissed every foul motion they could conjure. Convinced they had at last caged a fiend, no one halted to ponder how a gent so dreaded had never wounded a spirit before. But something peculiar transpired that afternoon. As Emily rested in the healer's quarters battling a delirium, she kept murmuring one thing beneath her breath. Not Marcus, not him. She echoed it repeatedly until the healer at last bent near and queried who had wounded her. Her reply rattled him so fiercely he fumbled his spectacles. She breathed the judge's title not in frenzy, but in weariness, like someone who'd borne a verity for ages too many. The healer's gaze drifted to her arm, the cord chafe still livid and scarlet. "And these traces?" he inquired tenderly. Emily's tone was scarce a murmur. The delirium struck swift. "I lashed myself to a stake beyond his stable, so I wouldn't stray into the grassland and perish. He severed me loose, bore me within, and when the delirium made me flail, I toppled the bench and gouged his bicep. He rescued me," Emily uttered once more, her gaze brimming with saline. "And they'll string him up for it." And they claimed he had wrought unthinkable deeds, 'cause they craved a rogue sturdy enough to shoulder their dread. Some even swore they could envision it vivid as noon. Emily pinned over a crude bench in his stable, cord chafes on her arms, his palms pinning her while she battled to wrench away. They said the gouge on his bicep was evidence she had strived to flee. Verity never had a shot against a fine tale. Within the cage behind the county house, Marcus Hale perched mute, eyeing the clay ground like a soul who knew none credited him. And the more Emily implored them to heed, the more they brushed off her phrases as the prattle of a spooked lass. But she wasn't prattling.
She was alerting them, because the gent she dreaded utmost was still at liberty and still nigh. If you're trailing this yarn, stick tight and mull subscribing so you don't skip the remainder. And while you're about it, brew yourself a steaming mug of brew and ease in. Share with me the hour it is for you just now and the spot you're tuning in from. By the time the sun crested over Silver Gulch the following morn, folks were already clustered in the plaza for what they dubbed a tribunal. It was a spectacle forged from dread and chatter, with Marcus Hale lashed to a pillar like a prize smack in the mist. And yet hither and yon in the throng, a few gents fidgeted on their boots. They had caught wind of what the healer had uttered the eve before. Skepticism had begun to slink in, even if none dared voice it aloud. Judge Hargrove strode from the county house clad in his poshest vest. Feigning a hobble like a scarred champion, the throng hummed and bobbed, crimed to credit every syllable ere he voiced a lone one. He jabbed at Marcus and alleged his bride had been abducted, thrashed, and all but slain. He dubbed Marcus a brute, and ever had been. "Gaze at her arm!" the judge roared, his timbre quavering with sham sorrow. "Cord chafes, and the gouge on that fiend's bicep proves she resisted." Folks applauded like they were in chapel. Not a spirit queried why Emily had bolted to that homestead from the outset. Marcus held firm, frame level, poise unwavering. "I didn't touch her. I'd sooner swing than injure that lass." Then he fell hushed again, like a soul who had already endured graver than the views of a mob. The healer strove to testify for him. He noted Emily's lesions were aged and stacked, not the labor of one eve. He noted the lass required repose, not a farce. But the judge quashed him with a single glare, and the throng, ravenous for a rogue, sealed their ears just as brisk. Then something unforeseen occurred. The healer's understudy, a young lad with quivering mitts, dashed into the plaza, hollering that Emily was roused and conversing, roused and pleading to be heeded. The judge stiffened at the echo of his own bride's title voiced with haste he couldn't command. The healer disliked the notion of shifting her, but the settlement was set to lynch a gent. He consented to let her testify, solely for an instant. 2 gents bore her forth on a timber seat so she could perch erect. She was ashen from torment, and her timbre was scarce above a breath. The throng had to incline and hush just to catch her. She hoisted her crown once, sought Marcus lashed to the pillar, and compelled the phrases forth. "He preserved my existence. I bolted to him. I wasn't seized. The blade was for the lesion, not for injury." She elevated her arm, bearing the cord chafes to the throng. "I bound myself. The delirium made me frantic. He sliced me loose. The bench tumbled when I flailed. The gouge on his bicep stemmed from me, not the reverse." Her timbre cracked. "All you reckon you beheld was me striving to endure, and he aided me in it." Her bosom surged, and the healer advanced, hoisting a palm. "That's sufficient. Any more, and you might slay her." He pivoted to the throng and echoed her phrases in a crisp, firm timbre. "She claims he preserved her existence. She claims she bolted to him and wasn't seized. She claims the blade was for the lesion, not for injury." Then he voiced the bit none craved to credit. "Those welts on her form are aged. They didn't arise from one eve at a homestead. They arose across many eves in a grand abode, and every healer in this district knows what that signifies." The judge's visage contorted with ire. He strove to muzzle her with a bellow, but the throng had absorbed too much. For the premier time, they regarded him and didn't spy a champion. They spied a gent fracturing beneath the burden of verity he figured he'd interred. When his fist clamped round Emily's arm and wrenched fiercely, the whole plaza hushed at once.
For a pulse, all halted. Then a half-dozen gents interceded at once, wrenching his digits from her arm ere he could haul her further. He scrapped like a trapped beast, bellowing that she was fibbing, bellowing that the settlement owed him fealty, bellowing that a bride was meant to yield. But the fiercer he shrieked, the more souls retreated from him, and the more they gazed toward Marcus Hale. Emily stretched for Marcus foremost. Her timbre was frail but firm. She bade them to unbind him. The healer acted swift, severing the cord from his arms. Marcus rose with a serene vigor, chafing the scarlet traces on his hide. But he didn't glance at the judge. He glanced solely at her. "You ought to have reposed longer." The settlement caught the phrases and spied something in that gaze. Something genuine, something scarce. By eventide, Judge Hargrove was bolted in the identical cage he had once flung others into. Marcus escorted Emily back to the healer's quarters, bracing her with one palm, wary not to inflict her torment. She inclined into him gently, not like a spooked dame clutching for shelter, but like someone at last permitted to select where she fit. In the days thereafter, the settlement strove to mend matters. Marcus merely requested that Emily be granted to mend without stairs. She passed her mending by the healer's casement, eyeing the ridges and awaiting Marcus to ride into settlement for provisions until she was sturdy enough to amble to his homestead. The breeze carried scents of hay and autumn soil, and Marcus lingered on the veranda as if he'd been anticipating her all along. No phrases passed at first. At times, the fitting souls comprehend one another sans utterance. She confided she wasn't returning to the judge's abode. She confided she craved a existence that sensed like her very own. Marcus didn't vow her flawlessness or sanctuary or a fable. He simply noted she could linger if she wished. And she did. From that day onward, folks in Silver Gulch murmured a distinct breed of yarn, a yarn about a homesteader faulted for shadows he didn't spawn, and a young dame who bolted toward the one gent who beheld her merit when none else did. A yarn about verity ascending even when shrouded 'neath chatter and dread. And those peculiar wails folks once murmured about proved not more than jackals in the breeze gliding through the ravine. And perhaps that's the moral for us all. Now and then the globe will deem arid heeds. Now and then souls will pick the noisiest timber over the sincere one. But vigor dwells in abiding by those who merit it, even when the mob dissents. So here's my query for you. If you'd been in Silver Gulch that autumn, whose yarn would you have credited? If this fable stirred you, tap heart and mull subscribing so you don't miss the next fable lurking on the path. Now brew yourself a toasty sip, lean back and share with me the hour it is where you're tuning in from and which corner of the globe you're hailing from.